In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a Toshiba Libretto SS1000. I'll be upgrading the spinning hard drive to a compact flash-based SSD. I'll have some tips on how to install Windows, how to find a power adapter, and finally, give a tour of the operating system. Let's start out by taking a look around the Libretto. On the side, we have a PC card slot. On the back, we have an eject slider for the PC card. Microphone in jack, infrared port. We also have our 15-volt non-standard power jack. On the other side, we have our recessed reset button, our battery lock slider, and a headphone jack in the lid. On the bottom here, we have a door for our proprietary memory module and a slider that exposes the dock connector. On the back of the screen, we have our left and right mouse click buttons. In track point, our power button. And now let's take a look at the dock. We have a 9-pin serial port, VGA out, USB connector underneath this little door, a split PS2 mouse and keyboard port, and a printer port. You can't see here, but you connect your power adapter to the side. Next, I'll connect this to the dock. We have some thumb screws to tighten it in, lock it on. And the little slider on top mates with the PC card ejector on the back. And you can see some molded cutouts in the back here, so you can still get to your infrared port and your microphone jack. So now as I flip through the documentation that came with my Libretto, let me give you a little brief history. The SS1000, I've also seen it as SS1000 CTA, came out in 1998 as a Japan-only model. There's also the SS1010 with slightly better specs. The 1000 came with a 166 MHz Pentium MMX. The 110 came with a 233 MHz. The 1000 came with 32 megabytes base built in. The 110 came with 64 megabytes, and you had a maximum of 96 megabytes through a proprietary memory module on the bottom. It has a 6.1 inch 640 by 480 4:3 aspect ratio screen. For storage, an unusually slim 6.5 millimeter 2.1 gigabyte ID hard drive. It was marketed as being super compact. For example, it's 1 pound 13 ounces versus 2 pounds 2 ounces for the CT110. It's also only an inch thick versus about an inch and a half for the 110 CT. I could say it feels really dense. For operating systems, it seemed to have come with Windows 95. Mine has a Windows 98 sticker on it. They say there's a free upgrade. I'll go into that more in the operating system installation section. So now let's begin the teardown. Let's start by removing the battery. First, we need to push this little locking tab down, and then we can move the entire slider, releasing the battery, lifting it away. Next, we need to remove the proprietary memory module. It's underneath this little door here. There's 2 screws. There's the shorter screw. There's a longer screw on the other side, closer to the label. Now we need to remove the 6 screws from the base. There's 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. Now the 3 screws here on the side with the dot connector are longer than the 3 screws on the side with the battery. Now next up, to remove the keyboard, we need to remove this little plastic strip above it. There's some little tabs on each end and some hooks on the back, so it just took a lot of gentle prying, and luckily I didn't break any clips. Next, to remove the keyboard, we've got to be careful because it's connected to a ribbon cable. We just slide the tabs on each end of the connector away to release the cable. Next, we need to disconnect the display cable coming from the screen. Just kind of gently pry up on the edges of this metal plate. It'll pop off. And then we can gently lift the top off. You can see a little metal piece fell out here. I put that back in later. Also a little brace across the top for the keyboard fell off. Also reinstall that in the end. Now this next part you can skip if you're just upgrading your hard drive. These two screws are holding on the heatsink for the processor. I just want to check it out, but I also read online that it's fairly easy to overclock these, but I'm just going to leave mine stock. So by bridging these three tiny little pads in different combinations, you're able to change the processor's megahertz. Just reinstall the heatsink now. So we have two screws here holding in the motherboard on either side of the battery bay. The one on the right here, the one on the left also comes with a little plastic cover over the battery connector. Checking out the CMOS battery here, I usually remove these. Unfortunately, corrosion has eaten its way down the leads into the connector and onto the board a bit. I'll show the cleanup shortly. So next, remove the hard drive. It's being held in by two screws going through the motherboard directly into the drive. Now the screws looked a little weird and my original screwdrivers felt like it's going to strip them out. This screwdriver here seemed to work pretty well, but these were in extremely extremely tightly. I recently just heard that Japan kind of uses their own standard for some Phillips screws. I wonder if that's what these are. So next we just kind of wiggle the hard drive off of its connector. And you'll see this is an extremely thin drive. Like I said, only 6.5 millimeters, which is really a non-standard size. It's going to cause some issues here shortly. So next I'm going to clean up that battery leakage. I've kind of shown this before. First I'm dotting on some white vinegar, letting it soak for a bit. I then hit it with some isopropyl alcohol, an anti-static brush, and then finally some electronics cleaner to try to get everything off the board. Now later I'd have to come back in and take a second pass at cleaning this up, because I noticed the PC card, which you can see directly to the left there, when I was trying to use my CD-ROM drive and my floppy drive to install an operating system, it would only power on for a second and then immediately turn off. So I think some of the corrosion got into there, but after a second pass of cleaning, it still didn't work. I decided to just leave it for now because I found another way to install the operating system. And now to prepare our drive, I'm just using my standard little 44-pin to compact flash adapter, a 4GB Transcend Industrial compact flash card, trimming those extra long jumper wires poking out the bottom. So here's where I'm realizing just how thin this little 6.5mm hard drive is, because it's actually thicker than my compact flash adapter. So it's going to take a little bit of modification to make this fit, and even then it's still a little bit too big. Kind of dug around all my adapters to see if I had something that would fit better. I even looked at one of my SD card adapters, but the way the connector lined up with the board is actually worse than this compact flash adapter. You kind of need the drive to be shorter than that stud you see on either side of the dot connector. As you can see here, as I'm putting pressure on, it is bending the motherboard connector a little bit, but most of the bend is coming from the compact flash adapter. So to make this fit, we're definitely going to have to cut down these drive select jumper leads. And then you can see here on the back, I used a little piece of wire, some solder, so I can set it as the master drive selection. So you can see it's still a little high here. Maybe I could have taken a Dremel to the corners of the compact flash socket, but this did go back together without any issues. It is putting more pressure on the connectors, although the compact flash adapter is more likely to break than the motherboard, but I'm not sure what else you can do for these little 6.5mm drives. My factory drive was not working. So now we can put the motherboard back into the base. We need to be careful of this little latch here that's used to eject the PC card slot. Mine kind of moved around when I was cleaning. You kind of want it so you can just see one of those little tiny round vias. And we also don't want the slider all the way into the unlock position, because this needs to hook into that latch. And if it doesn't, you won't be able to eject your PC cards after it's been plugged in. Then you might have to take the laptop back apart like I might have had to do. So pay close attention here and make sure that the little tab goes inside the little hook on the slot. And here I am just doing a quick test to make sure everything's all good before I put this all back together again. So now we start the reassembly. It's pretty simple, putting the two motherboard screws back in, the little plastic battery connector cover. And now to reinstall the screen and the top cover, we have this little metal clip that had fallen out when I pulled the top off. I'm pretty sure it just drops in just like this here. Now it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little piece of plastic sheet on top of the PC card slot. And it's poking outside the laptop, so I'm just kind of pushing it back inside. Next, pushing the display cable back under the motherboard. Now to reinstall the 6 screws into the bottom with the shorter screws by the battery, the longer screws by the dock. Reinstalling the memory module and the cover with the longer screw going towards the side with the label. Next, I need to put back in the little keyboard brace that had fallen out. There's little slots for the tabs to fit into. And finally, reinstalling the keyboard. You need to slide the tabs out, then slide in the cable, and then push the tabs back in to hold the cable securely. We reinstall the keyboard trim piece. We install the battery, and our upgrade is complete. And here's a quick little aside. When my Libretto first came, one of the keys had been knocked loose during shipping. I had to pop off one of the adjacent keys to see how it went back together. Basically, you want to install the little scissor frame into the keyboard first without the keycap. Now there's 4 little hooks on the keyboard, and there's 4 little tabs on the frame. You'll put 2 of the tabs into the hook on one side and then kind of slightly bend the frame so it pops into the other side. There's a separate little rubber dome that'll fit perfectly into the little circle with the tip up, and then you can just press the keycap on top of the switch. Quick comment on the power adapter. It's 15 volts like Toshiba laptops used for a long time. It's got a very unusual tip that wasn't used very long. It's also used on the Libretto 100 and 110 CT, but after the FF series they went back to the more standard round plug. These can be kind of pricey on eBay. You have to be careful because I've seen some adapters with the same part number that have the round plug that won't work. There's another adapter, the PA3035U, which you may have better luck finding. Otherwise, this site here is selling a tip that's compatible with most of the generic universal laptop power supplies that you can buy on Amazon. Just make sure you get one that supports 15 volts. Everything I just mentioned also applies to the 100 and 110 CT. And now, let me go over installing the operating system. Now, in the original press release, it said it comes with Windows 95 with a free upgrade to Windows 98. My Libretto has a Windows 98 sticker on it. It also came with both a Windows 95 and a Windows 98 instruction manual. I also only got a single CD, a product recovery CD, which extracting out some of the files, it looks like the disk labels show that it's a Windows 95 recovery CD. So I'm guessing that's what the factory restore image is based on. You just later install the retail Windows 98 CD provided by Toshiba. Now doing a recovery from the CD is a little tricky on these older Librettos, since they won't natively boot from USB and I can't even natively boot from a CD drive. From what I can tell, you need both a PC card based floppy drive and CD-ROM drive. You'd boot off a special boot disk, it would format your hard drive, it would make it a bootable drive and copy over the CD-ROM PC card drivers, so then you would swap to the floppy drive, to the CD-ROM, reboot off the hard drive, and then do the installation from the CD. This is what I actually planned to do since I actually had the product recovery CD. This seems to be kind of rare, I didn't see it online, so I've uploaded it to archive.org. But due to the damage to my PC card slot from that leaking battery, I wasn't able to use my drives. Now, while it is possible to modify the recovery media to disable the Toshiba checks and install it onto a generic PC and image it over, luckily someone had already posted a complete ghost image with the base Windows 95 factory install on archive.org. So I imaged that onto my compact flash card before I installed it. Fortunately, I ran into a slight issue. While it would work in safe mode, if I tried to boot Windows regularly, I'd get an error like VF Backup could not load VFD VXD to run setup. I saw a suggestion about adding in double buffer equals 1 to ms-dos.sys. That didn't really help me. So after playing around for a bit, the solution I came up with was to boot into safe mode, go into Device Manager, and change the ID controller from the special Toshiba Enhanced ID controller to the standard Microsoft generic ID controller. After doing that, it worked fine. I'll show how to do that in my Windows tour. Maybe it would work fine on a normal spinning hard drive. I just didn't like my compact flash card. So to close out this video, let's do our first boot, check out the BIOS, and I'll give a brief tour of Windows. There's some nice factory wallpaper here that I'll upload to archive.org. So in this section, I'm going to show how I updated my ID controller to fix that boot issue. Just by right-clicking on My Computer, going into Properties, and then Device Manager. We choose to update the driver. We're going to select it from a list. So the top one is the Toshiba driver, which didn't work. You want to choose the second one, which is the standard Microsoft IDE driver. But that's it. Thanks for watching.